Welcome to the Teachers Lounge. Today we have Sean Leonard, Senior DSQ at National Heritage Academies, and we are talking about the 2022 Summer Learning Plan. Sean, you and I were kind of talking offline and, saying summer is a time for kids to be free and play video games and screen time and play outside, but the harsh reality is that some of these kids are going to need to do some sort of learning. So as someone who's not a teacher, I've never maintained that I would be a good teacher. I'm really excited to kind of hear what a summer learning plan is, because I think we've all had friends that had to go to summer school, and you just picture them in a building for 10 hours a day learning fractions on handouts, and it's always sounded miserable to me. So I'm excited to kind of hear what NHA's view on summer learning and what the 2022 summer learning plan specifically actually is. So I guess maybe before we get too deep into it, you and I were talking offline about how COVID changes everything, right? It changed sports, it changed restaurants, and it changed how students learn, scores, and even the summer learning plan. So in 2022, what is kind of our broad view of what the summer learning plan is?
Yeah, connecting back to what you talked about with how summer learning has been viewed traditionally in the past. When we think about summer learning here at NHA, it's an opportunity not just for some students, but for all students to engage in learning outside of school. So summer is that time where students are outside of the physical building or traditional learning for three or more months. And so the idea behind it is COVID has taught us that there are ways to engage our students in learning outside of the physical building that we could take advantage of to help with closing achievement gaps and to maintain performance levels that not just some, but all of our students need. And so when we think about what's our vision here at NHA for summer learning, it's really that opportunity to ensure that kids are able to engage in learning when they're not in a traditional learning setting.
And that, I think, this isn't a conversation about COVID, but I think 3 years ago, like the amount of things we do virtually now, like we have somebody on my team that's 100% virtual. The thought of that pre-COVID was just crazy. But, you talk about COVID, they don't need to be in the classroom to do these things. So, as we kind of work through the session objectives, provide a purpose for our K-12 summer learning plan. Introduce updated resources and support. So when we say updated resources and support, is that kind of what you're talking about of, it's not your traditional workbook for some of this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think about when the pandemic first started and we entered the first summer of the pandemic, how we engaged our students in summer learning included students receiving workbooks, and they were engaging in Zoom meetings or Google Meet meetings with their teachers around those workbooks. And all well intended, but I think there's an opportunity for us to learn from that and improve the learning experiences for our students. And so I'm excited to be able to share with you and the rest of the team here with NHA that here's where we're going with summer learning and some of the updated resources that are being provided to schools to help engage students in learning throughout the summer.
And then just kind of the third bullet we have on here for assessment objectives is provide guidance for schools when using the updated SLP resources. You showed this to me before we started recording. It's pretty sweet looking.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not a teacher. It's pretty cool, even seeing it from the outside in. So I'm kind of excited to walk through that in more depth once we get to that point. So my hope is this is the last time I will reference COVID. But when we look at some of the differences in learning with the year before COVID, the year when COVID hit, and the year after COVID, when we looked at interns and learning scores, one of the differences on the graph that you have is there was an 11-point drop on, pre-COVID to COVID. That's a big number. Is the focus of the summer learning plan starting to build some of that ground back up?
Absolutely. And it's connected to what we saw from our learning data prior to COVID. So prior to COVID, when we look at our portfolio of schools, our students were growing at a higher rate than their peers, and our schools were consistently outperforming our neighboring districts. And so what that means is that our students were performing better than their peers being part of NHA, which is great. That's why we exist, right?
Yeah.
And so when we think about what the pandemic showed us, which is what the data is showing us here, is that there's been a tremendous learning loss for our students. And not just ours, but for all our kids, all kids. And so we set a goal at the beginning of this school year to return our student learning performance to what we call pre-pandemic learning levels. And so we looked at interims prior to COVID and set a goal for all of our schools to get back to their learning levels at that interim level prior to the pandemic. And this year's data is showing that we're making tremendous progress towards that goal. However, there's an opportunity for us to utilize the time during the summer to help continue that trajectory for all of our students. And so when we think about our purpose truly is to get back to that pre-pandemic learning level. And summer gives us that opportunity to be able to do that.
And I think, you said summer gives us the opportunity to do that. I think you're 100% right. One thing I do want to point out, too, because I think there's a lot of COVID fatigue, and this is not the first conversation that's happened about the learning loss from COVID and all these things. One thing I do want to highlight, though, is the first year after, you already got halfway back into your goal. Like, this is not, and I've talked to a lot of teachers about this, of how do we get kids, whether it's social emotional learning, mental health, all these things, and they said, you can't flip a switch. This is going to take time. But I think that says a lot about the school leadership in our NHA schools, the teachers in our NHA schools, and probably to a degree the students taking on ownership of this, that 11-year in ELA, or 11% drop in ELA, 10% drop in math in 1 year, but also there's been a 6% gain in 1 year. And that to me is really exciting. And I'm excited to see where the summer learning program kind of helps fill in some of these gaps along the way.
And that's exactly what you and I were talking about as we set up our meeting here today. When we think about the fatigue, not just leadership fatigue, but teacher fatigue and life fatigue that all of our team members across all of our schools have experienced. It's been hard. It's been hard on our teachers. It's been hard on our leaders. And it's 2 years in. And to that point, even in the midst of all of those challenges of, having to contact trace, having to figure out how do we keep schools open when I have 10, 11, 12 teachers that are out, the results that we're seeing because of the efforts of our leaders and our teachers is being resulted here. And it's ultimately why we exist when we think about why families choose us over going someplace else, because they know they're going to get best in class education for their students. And our data supporting that even in the middle of this pandemic.
And I think to your point of best in class education, that doesn't stop the end of May, the 1st of June.
Nope.
Right? You had this goal to get back to pre-pandemic dates or pre-pandemic levels. This is just another tool in the toolbox to get back to. That's cool to see.
Exactly.
So we look at this next slide. What is our NHA summer learning plan? When you sent this to me, when I read this sentence to myself, all students provided summer learning, self-paced and or in-person opportunities by each school using our curricular tools and assessments. I thought that is a great sentence. Whoever wrote that is a great writer. I didn't know any of it, what it meant. Reading comprehension has never been my strong suit. So walk me through what that well-crafted sentence actually means.
Yeah, so when schools developed their plans for summer learning, it started with how much available funding that they had. And so some schools have an abundant amount of resources when it comes to investing in closing achievement gaps. And some of our schools have a limited amount. And so we didn't want our summer learning plan to be limited by the available resources that a school may have, because we want all of our kids to engage in summer learning throughout the summer, because they all need it. And so schools have an opportunity to go through two paths. One is self-paced, and one is in-person.
Okay.
And so some schools are going to be able to do both self-paced and in-person, but ultimately, based on available resources that a school may have, those are the two paths that they have available for their students.
Okay.
And that being said, we have, and I know we're going to go to a little bit further, but we have amazing curricular tool and assessment resources that's going to be connected to how to make sure whichever path students are engaged in, they're getting, again, best in class education.
Yeah. And I think too, I work in marketing, my brain kind of works in marketing. This to me feels a lot like when you look back at like the advertising that happened in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was basically billboards and TV commercials. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't tell you how many red cars drove by a billboard. I couldn't tell you how many people were watching my commercial. But now with social media, the targeting, Google Ads, you can say every ad is almost custom fit to a consumer. And how you were describing some of these softwares to me, this Dreambox, Sora, Lexia, it feels a lot like that, where this is not just, let's throw a billboard up of summer learning and hope, I don't know, whoever needs it does it, and whoever doesn't won't ever use it. Mm-hmm. But this to me feels very targeted to the student. Is that kind of the thought around using these specific curricular tools?
Yes, because that was the thought process when we developed the tools for our core curricular instruction throughout the year. And so, thinking about our digital tools, Dreambox and Lexia, those are the resources that our students should be using as part of their self-paced summer learning program. These are the same resources that students have been using throughout the school year in ELA and math core instruction. Okay. And so how those resources were selected was based on what you just talked about. How to help students stay engaged in their learning, how targeted it was for students, and how to help students with their progress around specific skills. Mm-hmm. And so both Dreambox, Lexia provide that as a resource, and then Sora is our digital library where students are able to check out books throughout the summer using this as a resource. And so for all of our students, they'll all have access to these resources throughout the summer, whether they're in person or not. Mm-hmm. And the idea behind it is these are the tools for our self-paced programs that schools should be using.
And it's so cool to me that this is not just, this is NHA's summer learning program. Whether it works for you or not, have fun. You have to go through it regardless, but it is, with the tools that come with digital platforms, it allows each student to kind of get what they need out of it. And that to me is really cool. And when you start looking at some of these platforms, you and I were talking before this, every kid in this age is probably playing video games, Fortnite, whatever. And there's this degree of gamification that comes with it where it doesn't. I had a buddy who was in summer school, and I always hope that he never finds this podcast because I use Nick a lot as examples when it comes to classroom issues. But he always talked about he was in there for 8 or 9 hours, he had a packet, and he never learned anything. It was just get to the end of the day to check off the list. I went to summer school, I can go to the next grade. Mm-hmm. He was in summer school a lot, for multiple grades. But when you look at some of these softwares that are in there, this does not look like a packet of math problems of how to learn fractions. I mean, these legitimately look like games these kids would be playing in the summer anyways.
Yeah, and that's connected to what we talked about earlier about how much we've learned from the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So, 2 years ago when we first shut down and students were learning remotely, the resource that was primarily used as a part of instruction were packets. Mm. And so, and well-intended, right? Like it was great content that was in there and it was all connected to what students were learning during the school year. And we intentionally use very similar strategies and resources around how kids were learning when we were actually in person. But at the end of the day, like you pointed out, how much feedback are you getting from a packet? And so, with the amazing work from our CNI team in selecting these digital tools that currently are part of our core instruction, students are already used to using these tools. They're already excited about using these tools. And I've been in plenty of classrooms where students were excited about showing me how much progress that they've made, and they're able to, collect badges, and they're able to engage in games once they unlock certain lessons. So that gamification that you're talking about is real, and our kids get excited about it.
And I just even think of myself as a 10-year-old, didn't pay enough attention in the multiplication tables. Do I want a packet in the summer when I know all my friends are playing baseball? Or do I want something that's like, oh, I'm winning these badges? It feels very much like a video game. Like catering this to their learning style, to your point of what we learned going through COVID, I think is pretty cool to see.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that being a resource. And so we intentionally set up goals or expectations around how much time students should be engaged in these resources based on the guidance and the resources provided by the actual curricular tools themselves. That says, hey, if Scott engages in 5 or 6 lessons per week in Dreambox, here's what his progress will look like over the course of the summer. And so the minutes that you see here is directly aligned to what's the guidance that's being provided on how much time students should be using these tools in order to get to the end goal that we're talking about.
And I'm just looking at like 230 minutes per week. What's that? 4 hours for K through 2. So it's you're not having these kids write a thesis statement in these programs, which I think is pretty cool.
Exactly.
So in-person resources. This is one you said you wanted to highlight. Again, not a teacher, so when I look at this, I just see 4 screenshots of a lot of work that was put in. So walk us through what actually, what is a balanced library? What is the slide on how to students learn math? And kind of walk us through what is this and kind of the thought behind it.
Yeah, so we are at the end of an implementation window of our curricular tools in ELA and math. And so we spent the last 4 or 5 years helping our schools transition from previous curricular tools to tools that are now research-based, best in class, in supporting students in their academic progress. And so in the past, schools have been able to utilize whatever resources that they had available in order to provide quality instruction for kids that were actually physically coming into the building for summer learning. And school A might take one approach in using some resources, and school B might take a different approach, all with the same end goal of trying to help kids progress throughout the summer. But we have a great opportunity now where we're at the end of the window of implementation of our curricular tools. You already saw the data earlier that talks about how much progress our kids have made prior to the pandemic. And a large part of that comes with both the leadership of our principals as well as the curricular tools that's been available for our students and how our teachers have utilized those tools in instruction. Here's a great opportunity for us to do the same thing as part of summer. And so as a part of this updated summer learning plan, our C&I team is going to be able to provide strategies to utilize the resources that have already been a part of our core instruction during the school year and how to use those same resources during the actual summer.
And that to me is one thing I've always appreciated about NHA. It's very data-driven, and decisions get made off of the data that best helps the students. And this to me feels like another example of that. And I know we keep going back to the same example. You're not just giving kids a handout every summer, but these in-person resources really are designed to help the students learn how they learn and give teachers the feedback that they need about the students during the summer. And that to me that's cool.
And that's a big part of the resources that's been available during the school year. We have for each of our curricular tools in ELA and math, to your point, we have what we call common assessments that assesses what students have been taught and how much that they've learned them over a short period of time. So that way teachers can make adjustments to help students like Sean progress beyond proficiency. And, I know, Scott, you're still working a little bit. And so, the data can help those teachers provide intentional differentiated instruction for students. And that's been a part of the school year. And this will be available as a part of the summer.
And that to me goes back to our billboard example of, let's throw a Chick-fil-A billboard up on the side of the road. I can't tell you how many cars drove by it, how many red cars, what time, if anybody's going to the restaurant after this. That to me felt a lot like packet learning, where it's just kind of like this, you just take this. Where with the reporting on the back end, it feels a lot more like digital advertising, where I say I want to market to this age demographic or at this time, where you're getting so many more metrics. Your instructional learning is so much more precise than instead of just the drinking out of a fire hose, where it's just, this is what we do, we'll hope it works.
Well, it's to that point. So typically, if I'm a student and I'm invited to be part of a school's in-person summer learning, there are some academic skills that I need to work on.
Mm.
And so knowing which skills are most important for me to move from third grade to fourth grade and how to teach those skills using the curricular resources that we've been talking about, like that is now going to be available as a part of the summer learning plan. And in addition to that, one of the things that's being added as a resource is at the end of the in-person summer learning plan, schools will have what we call end of summer learning assessments, where we can actually assess how much students have progressed based on the skills that they need to know in order to move on to the next grade level. And so similar to, we talk about interim. So we have an interim 1, interim 2, and an optional interim 3 at the end of the school year. We're going to use some of the resources from interim 3, which is basically a collection of all of the skills or standards that students should know at the end of the grade level, and use that as an end of summer learning assessment for schools to make critical decisions for students. So that way we can know if a student needs more support in specific areas. So as they move in from third grade to fourth grade, we already know what are those deficiencies that students may need more support with.
Yeah.
But then there are some students that we're going to have to make critical decisions around promotion or retention. And so this is going to be great information for schools to be able to have as a part of their resources to make those decisions.
And this might be the dumbest question I ask you all day, but to me this feels a lot like you're worried about Scott, the summer school student, not the class that Scott is in.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's cool. So when we look at the in-person guidance, you've got 3 bullets on here. Mm-hmm. What was the thought around these 3?
So really the whole idea behind it is this practice of utilizing our curricular tools and utilizing our common assessments and administering end of summer learning assessment. Like, this is new. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to make sure that all of our school leaders that were operating in-person summer learning understood what's the whole goal at the end of the day when we have our in-person learning happening for our students. We want to be able to use the tools that we know work. We want to be able to utilize those common assessments as needed to help with informing instruction on specific skills or standards that students need. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, we want to know if kids are ready to move on or not.
And that, to me, it's almost like you've got little benchmarks throughout the summer too, where it's not just end of summer, pass fail. Mm-hmm. And again, my dear friend Nick, it was always a fun last couple of days of the summer. It's like, you're coming with us, man? Did you pass or did you fail? But this, again, I think it's to your point of you're educating Nick and not necessarily Nick's class, which I think is pretty cool.
Exactly.
So when we look at the same that was for K through 8. So when we look at it for some of our high school 9 through 12 in-person resources, what is credit recovery courses?
Yeah, our high schools looks different.
Yeah.
When we think about our high schools, really it's about credits towards graduation and preparation for college. And so for our students that are participating in summer learning in high school, it's truly through the lens of credit recovery. So if I have an algebra course that I need to get credit for and I didn't get it during the school year, now I have an opportunity to receive those credits during the summer.
Okay.
And so that's how our programs are developed in our high schools, is through the lens of credit recovery. So we have a 6-week program. Mm-hmm. We have a specific start date and end dates as a part of the programs themselves. And it's truly through the lens of the portfolio of students that need credit recovery. How do we provide those opportunities for students to receive credit recovery? Okay. And the instruction is set up for that purpose.
Okay. So I see like you have dates on here, and my little heart is excited. These kids are going to get some sort of summer vacation. It doesn't start till June 27th, and it ends. You still have a couple weeks after. But the bullet I really like on here is expectations to be determined by building. So, and that I think speaks so much to what we've been talking about, where yes, this is the summer learning program, but students at Ridge Park might have complete different things than PrepNet Virtual.
Exactly.
And I think that to me is really cool that it's determined by each building. So how are those determinations built?
Yeah, so when we think about our high schools, our high schools, Grand River Prep, Canton Prep, they have to look at their student population and decide based on how many credits students have developed over time in order to be prepared for college or graduation and college acceptance. That's how their programs are actually developed. It's based on the needs of the population themselves. So what's needed at Arbor Prep is going to look very different than what's needed at Taylor Prep.
Yep.
And so how they develop their programs is truly based on student need.
And one of the things I really enjoy about this program, the conversation we're having, it's not like you came to me and said, hey, let's have an interview, and I need to say this is tailored to each student, and we just need to, we need to show that message, and just that's what we're pitching. This is very intentional all the way through. It's not like, oh, we have this digital software that's specific to these kids. No, it's that. It's also the credits, the expectations, the curriculum. Like, this is not something that is just a message that's trying to be pushed, but it comes out with the intentionality of this program. And that to me is really cool to see.
Well, that comes from, summer learning, like we talked about before, isn't new for both our high schools and our KA schools. But what we've learned through last year specifically is, how better we can support our schools in providing summer learning opportunities for students, which is why we're having this discussion here, because a number of team members here at our service center has pitched in to help support our schools as a part of summer, but also to provide these enhancements that we're talking about to help our students.
So we talked at the beginning, one of my favorite things about this was the Summer Learning 2022 app on SLE. And you were briefly walking me through it, and I didn't fully understand it because, again, I'm not in my NHA a lot, I'm not a teacher, but the support and the customization is what I really liked about it. So walk me through what this actually is.
Yeah, so I want to take you a little further back in how summer programs are typically developed prior to this year. And so every year a school has to utilize their, I would say, investment plan dollars. So Title I for all of our schools, 31A in some of our Michigan schools, but essentially these are funds that are specifically designed to help support schools in closing achievement gaps for students. And so in the past, schools would develop their summer learning plan based on their available funding during what we call the investment planning season. From there, all of that information would be entered into a spreadsheet. And then that information then would start the conversation as far as collaboration between schools and the service center on here's what a school wants to do with their summer learning plan. How do we actually make it happen? How do we get all the people hired? How do we get all of the purchasing done for a school? Hiring is just one part of it. Let's say I decide that Scott's going to be one of our teachers, and we need to make sure that he has the credentials to be able to do that. So there's just a number of different steps that has to occur from this investment planning season. Well, last year we increased the number of schools that operated in-person summer learning, which then magnified the need for support to happen on a regular basis. And so one specific example, and I'm sure your partner Sophie has probably shared this with you a little bit from her experience from last year with summer learning, staffing.
Yes.
So last year our schools had to complete staffing spreadsheets that connected to their summer learning plan, that then had to inform who they were going to hire. It also had to inform how they were going to be paid and credentialing, and it wasn't great. I'm just going to be honest, Scott. And so this is a great opportunity because one of the people that has been instrumental in helping improve this process has been Synovio James from our INA team. And Synovio has created this summer learning app on SLE, which is basically designed to be this one source of truth
Okay.
for the school and for everybody that supports our schools. And so this is real live right now, where schools are able to see what's currently in their investment plan and what information is needed for the different teams here at the Service Center to help support their plans.
That's cool. And I think that speaks to just the quick evolution of incorporating more technology into this, from an Excel spreadsheet to an actual platform. That's cool to me. So when we look at, confirm information on the investment plan tab, this is just a screenshot. Is this in the actual platform?
Yes.
Okay.
So there are two tabs that a school will see when they look at their Summer Learning 2022 app.
Okay.
They're going to see the investment plan app, which captures what was in their original investment plan and how that's being communicated as number of pairs they might need, number of teachers they might need, how many weeks they're going to operate the program. Everything that developed their budget for their summer learning plan from their investment plan is actually captured here.
Okay.
And so the goal is for this to be the one source of truth to inform everyone here at our service center to help support the schools.
Okay.
Because one of the great parts about this process that Synovio has done is, and we were talking about this offline a little bit, so Oracle is a topic that has caused some frustration over the last few months.
Yep.
And one of the frustrations connects to the whole hiring and credentialing process. Well, for summer, once this information is confirmed, once you identify, hey, you have 6 paras, and you're able to identify who those 6 paras are, using this app, we're going to take care of all of the hiring for you.
That's cool.
So you don't have to do anything with Oracle.
Yeah. I mean, that itself, I don't know, the people at home are probably giving you a standing ovation for that comment.
I might get a few high five points for that. Give it to Synovio. It's not me.
But I think to your point, this feels very much like we're coming out of the Stone Age into digital with this and really putting an emphasis on the summer learning. So just for the folks at home on the back end, there is a lot that goes in to make sure somebody's credentialed when they hired. Yeah, I'm sure everybody's sick of hearing about the teacher shortage and all of these things that now it just exists in here and it's not on an Excel document.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was one of the favorite points of last summer, I'm sure. So we have on here, enter and keep up to date program information, and this is another screenshot in there.
So this is the second tab.
Okay.
So you have the investment plan tab.
Yeah.
And the other tab that the principals will see is additional info tab or program information tab. And so there are several questions that are listed here that at some point schools are going to have to decide when it comes to their summer learning plan. And many of them might already be decided. But again, the whole purpose of this app is to be that one source of truth for those that support our schools here at the Service Center to gather information. So instead of me calling Gen Ed Achieve 3 times on a Monday to find out more information, this app is going to be able to help inform that. So keeping this up to date is critical. And at the end of the day, there's going to be a date to be determined where this is going to be closed. It's not going to be until May or so. So schools have plenty of time to be able to enter in information. But ultimately, the goal behind this is to be that one source of truth.
Okay. So we've got additional tabs on here too. Is this the additional tabs in the SLE?
Yeah, so this is what's coming. So there's going to be an opportunity for schools that operate in-person summer learning. They're going to have their roster of students that they are inviting to their summer learning plan. They're going to be able to manage that on their own. And from there, you can also push out invitations to families via email or text to say, hey, Scott, Sean is being invited to summer learning. Here are the weeks. Are you accepting this invitation or not? So this is what the invite manager is going to be.
Okay.
along with that, let's say, again, I'm using you as an example like Nick. Scott is the teacher for third grade.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we need to know which students Scott has on his roster. And so the student management part of it is going to be connected to the same app.
Yep.
And this is also where you're able to set up for teachers to actually take attendance. So teachers are going to have a very similar app that allows them to know which students are on their roster, know which students to take attendance on every day.
Okay.
But the setup for it is going to be part of the app that the schools see. So again, one location for all of the critical information.
So I actually have a random question on that. You say one location for all of the information. Was this everything done on Excel last year?
This was everything done in random places.
Okay. So this is a Q second standing ovation probably. But the fact that all of this is staff mapping, support, roster management, student management, inviting a manager, that to me I'm sure is just a relief to anybody that's going to be involved in this program.
Yeah.
Because even trying to track stuff down, it's like, man, what did they call that? Is it on SharePoint? Did they send it to me? But just to have this in one point, you're right, Synovio. It's going to be a lot of people's hero before the summer's over. So we are sitting here on the second or third week of March. So what is next before we officially get to the summer learning program?
Yeah, so next week, Synovio is going to send out an email to principals that basically introduces a lot of this information and also asks them to respond to specific questions about their program.
Okay.
And so if they can respond to Synovio's email by April 4th, that would be great.
Okay.
Because that's going to help us with continuing the plan that we have with supporting our schools.
Okay.
As much as they can, as soon as they can, updating the program information on the Summer Learning 2022 app is going to be critical. Because again, the more we can get those details, the more that our teams here can know what's happening to start planning for supporting our schools.
Okay.
And lastly, Synovio continues to work on the development of this app, both for teachers and for our principals. Okay. And by the way, principals will be able to have summer learning coordinators have the same access that they have in this app. Okay. But we're going to provide a webinar to help everyone with knowing how to navigate the resources, the invitation manager, the student rostering. So all of that's going to be coming very soon. Okay.
I think the best way to describe our entire conversation was last year, the year before, maybe even a couple years before that, we were playing chess. And that's just what it was doing. Now we were playing checkers. See, I wasn't that far from summer school. We were playing checkers for years, and now we're playing chess.
Without a doubt.
And that to me, when you look at the concentrated, the targeted, the curriculum, the learning, the platforms, how school leaders can not look in 15 different places in SharePoint and Excel, and did Sean send that to me? I think he did. He's asking me to update it. I can't find the stupid thing. And now it's all in one place. I think this helps a lot of people. I think it helps school leaders. I think it helps, the service center be a part of this. But at the end of the day, I think it helps the students, and that's what we started this conversation with, was getting them back to pre-pandemic learning levels. Yeah. And targeting this to them, catering it to them. And yes, it's easier on the back end for a lot of folks involved, but it's far more targeted and far more efficient for students. And I think that's the coolest part about this.
That's what I love about us here at NHA. Mm-hmm. Over the time that I've been here, we continue to be best in class. Yep. And when I go visit schools outside of NHA, I'm in awe of what we're able to do. And it's because of our leaders that, we're able to talk with here. But it's also because of the support that we get from our service center. I think that the more we can take the feedback that's being provided from our schools, even as we're talking about summer learning, which is where a lot of the feedback has come from to help make these improvements, it's going to be best for our kids. And so that's why we do what we do.
Cool. Well, thank you. Like I said, someone who's not a teacher, this was absolutely fascinating to listen through, and I'm sure people that are in this every day are really going to appreciate some of this information. So, Sean, thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.